Greetings everyone and welcome to another Starship Review. This is part 8 in my ongoing series reviewing the ships from the 10th Anniversary Bundle. Today we take a look at the Ross Legendary Command Exploration Cruiser, aka the Enterprise D or the Galaxy class. There was a Reddit thread a while back asking which ships from the bundle people were the greatest disappointment, and by far the most common response was the Ross. At first blush, this makes sense. It's not a substantial upgrade to the C-Store version, it doesn't have sexy Miracle Worker seating, and the trade is on the boring side. It also has too much engineering seating. However, there's more to meet the eye with this ship. Wait, that's the wrong franchise. This ship has more to offer than it appears, I should say. For starters, how about a whopping 1.55 hull modifier? I don't usually talk about hull and shield modifiers or turn rate or inertia, as I consider those to be secondary stats, which you'd obviously like to be as good as possible, but if they aren't, you can always work around them without too much fussing. They aren't deal breakers, in other words. It's the weapon layout, console layout, bridge officer layout, along with traits, consoles, and extras that really get the top billing. In this case, however, the hull modifier is so large that it bears mentioning. Very few ships have a hull modifier that can match or exceed this one, and when you're the best at something, or at least near the best, it makes you attractive when positions become available that require such a thing. In this case, tanking, especially because some of the only ships with a higher hull modifier don't have attract fire because they aren't cruisers. That doesn't mean it's the best tank in the game, but it's up there. A high hull modifier gives you more value out of your hull capacity buffs and hull regeneration, as well as more crit chance from Tyler's duality, which is important because tanks often have to walk a fine line between damage and survival, at least on elite TFOs anyway. It's one of those cases where a secondary stat rises up to become as important as a primary stat. That's just the appetizer though, as the Ross is also a full command ship, which makes it great for DPS. Not energy weapon DPS, of course, but torpedo DPS due to the ability to use Concentrate Firepower 3. In case you missed the memo, and it didn't find its way to me very quickly either, torpedoes are king now. 15 of the top 20 parses on the STO combat meter tables are torpedo boats. And the first sign of anything different is a science build all the way down at number 11, clearly benefits from other people helping it based on the amount of recursive shearing damage, so not exactly something you can replicate in your ISA pugs. In other words, torpedoes are the best, and the Ross can do torpedoes. It does require some traits and things to really be viable, rather than just optimal like other builds do, so the higher cost of entry for torpedoes might not be accessible to everyone, and that's definitely a consideration. If you only plan on using this ship with beams, then it's going to be the poorest performer of the bundle. It really is a world of two different extremes. Everything else about it is what you'd expect from a cruiser. It has a 4-4 weapon layout, but since it can't use dual cannons, that doesn't really matter much. It only has 3 tactical console slots, which isn't ideal, but it's not a deal breaker for torpedo boats if that's the route you're going, although it would be a big hit for a beam boat. Still, a bit on the weak side no matter what, and a torpedo boat would rather have more tactical consoles given the choice. It has a lot of engineering seating, with both the Commander and Lieutenant Commander fixed engineering. These are all slight paper cuts, but they will add up in the final tally. Let's turn our attention to the traits and consoles. First up, the Legacy trait, Explosive Polarity Shift. It only works with reverse shield polarity, and when it ends, it does a point-blank AoE kinetic damage with 100% shield pen to enemies within 3 kilometers. The damage is based on how many stacks of its special buff it gives you when you take damage while reverse shield polarity is active. Although the Ross is built for tanking, there are far better traits out there for tanking, and I don't really like the 3 kilometer restriction. The idea that you could completely fail to do any damage at all because the enemies immediately around you died before you could get close to some other ones just doesn't do this trait any favors. What about the new trait, Make It So? Other than having an awesome name, it gives you Cat 1 damage and a healing boost when you use Bridge Officer abilities, with Ensign giving the smallest amount and Commander the most. It's a bland trait with a mediocre effect, I'm sorry to say. I wish I had something nicer to say about it because I really want to like it, but it's just not giving me anything to work with. There's no visuals or anything either. Both of the buffs are nice to have though. It's easy to use, and unlike other traits that are overly niche or have weird requirements, You could just slot this on any ship and enjoy the benefits. I mean, everyone needs damage and healing, so it's hardly bad. I don't want to give you that idea. It's just a milquetoast trait, you know? Unoffensive and forgettable. Much like the Defiant and Voyager, this is a captain ship from the older days of Star Trek Online, so it has a Tier 4, 5, and 6 version, all of which lend their consoles to the Ross. Let's look at the first one, Antimatter Spread. It has no passive and a 1-minute cooldown, and does a point-blank AoE Placate, Confuse, and Perception debuff to foes within 5 kilometers. Thematic perhaps because it comes from the Best of Both Worlds 2-parter that's widely considered some of the best TNG has to offer, but it doesn't do anywhere near enough to consider using in the game. The next console, Saucer Separation, is basically the same as the one from the Legendary Odyssey. It detaches from your saucer from your ship and turns it into a pet, while improving your maneuverability at the expense of some survival stats. I don't like using it for the same reason I don't use the Odyssey one, because I think it looks silly. Still, it's essential roleplay for the Enterprise D. The Tier 6 console, Molecular Cohesion Nullifier, has a passive +5 to max subsystem power, which doesn't stack with other max buffs, but that's normal for those kinds of buffs. It has a clicky that does a point-blank AoE physical damage and scales with the number of foes hit, and gives you some damage resistance, also scaling with the number of foes hit for 20 seconds. If this had a 1-minute cooldown like the others, it might be worth talking about, but as it stands, it's kinda weak. So where does that leave us? 2 milquetoast traits and a weak console set. The Ross has the stats for tanking and the seating for a decent high-end torpedo build, but if you don't want to do either of those things, then it's certainly lackluster in many other ways. What you want to do with it and what you have access to is greatly going to influence its capabilities and your enjoyment, probably. However, because it does have great potential in at least 2 different areas, it deserves some respect for that. But it's not going to be the absolute best at everything, and even if you do go one of the 2 routes I mentioned, it's still going to be lackluster in some areas, and that has to be factored in as well. I'm going to give the Legendary Galaxy a 9. Thanks for watching. If you made it to the end of the video and liked it, then please leave a like. And if you want to see more of my stuff in the future, including the rest of these reviews, then please consider subscribing. Have a great day, take care, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.